Welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about the next two psychoanalytic approaches in film theory, character analysis and spectatorship. So let's get started. Thanks. As you may remember from the previous video on psychoanalytical film theory, those two approaches attempted to analyze films from without. Now let's get inside film and let's see how character analysis works. As the name of the approach suggests, we are working with the fictional life of a character. We need to identify the unconscious motivations, the unconscious childhood traumas, for example, to explain the deeds and acts and thoughts of a character in a film or in a cycle of films. While it may sound much better than explaining a film or motives of characters in a film based on the filmmaker's biography, we have to be cautious here as well, because we are working with a fictional character, with a fictional life, with a fictive unconscious, and with fictive traumas. You have to be extra careful in analyzing, in a psychoanalytic term, a character in this way. In terms of Hollywood movies, usually we talk about a male character, a male protagonist whose life should be analyzed in some ways. Now, this male character leaves home to overcome some obstacles or to solve some problems, and the end of these endeavors, he attains a kind of a socially accepted subjectivity. For many critics, this journey is very similar to the way Sigmund Freud analyzed the Oedipus story. Indeed, the series of events and deeds by a character in a film might be very similar to the unconscious impulses and steps in attaining a psychosexual manhood and subjectivity as laid out by Freud in his analysis of Oedipus. Now, what is this Oedipal story to start with? Well, first we have a prophecy telling the king that the son will kill him. So the king decides to get rid of the son once he's born, but as usual with Greek tragedies, the son comes back and accidentally kills him. Then he marries his own mother, hence the Oedipus Complex, the usual expression that we use every day. Upon marrying the queen, that is his mother, he becomes the king, finishing the job of killing off symbolically the father. This is the story that Freud takes as a basic model for psychosexual development in the male child. He doesn't talk about a female child, and that's a problem, as we will see later on. So the little boy realizes his own difference from the mother, with whom he imagined himself as one. This difference induces a fantasy of punishment. Why does mother lack the thing that I do have? And here comes the third term, the father, the power position, who is capable of punishing mother. And if he's capable of doing that, then definitely he can punish me if I want to get back to mother to attain that initial dual unity that I had with her. Mind you, these are all unconscious. Nothing is conscious. It's not sexualized on the conscious level. This causes what we call castration anxiety in the child, and it helps him move on and identify with the father figure or the father himself and find another replacement for the mother. And hence, because we need to repress the desire for the dual unity, that is getting back to the unity with the mother, this is the birth of what we call unconscious, and this is the result of what we call the primary repression. That is the first repression that we experience throughout the psychosexual development. The outcome of these shifts in identification in the male child in his psychosexual development is what we call heteronormative subjectivity. It actually happens just when the child reaches the stage in his development where he can identify himself as the pronoun I. That is, he starts to look at himself as a coherent unity instead of addressing himself in the third person singular. In Hollywood terms, this is when the child leaves home, leaves mother to go through a series of challenges, at the end of which he can prove his father wrong and he can attain his subjectivity, that is a stable position in society, very similar to his father's. So far, we have seen psychoanalytic approaches that analyze film from without, from within, from a character aspect. So let's turn and let's move on to a new topic, which is the spectator. In other words, how do we spectators see and comprehend film? How do we see the characters developing? How does it all get into our minds? How do we make sense of it all, the visuals and the narratives? Once again, we have to go back to our own protagonist in film theory, Christian Matz. Matz's primary aim was to sketch and understand how we human beings, once we are in the cinema, in the auditorium, in the darkened room, with a flickering light emitted from the projector and reflected on the screen, how do we perceive the film and how do we accept it as our own reality for the duration of the filmic narrative? In other words, how do we spectators enter the diegetic world? How do we get involved in the narrative act? He emphasizes here the role of the camera, constructing the filmic world, and yet it is always absent. You can never see the camera in the film. To simplify it, basically the position of the camera is a hole, is an absent hole within the texture of the film. It punches a hole into the film and drags you in. But how does it do it? Well, first of all, it assigns a point of view that we need to inhabit. Funny thing is, you cannot but identify with this point of view, because if you don't identify with the camera's look, then how on earth are you going to see what is inside the filmic world? This is how you can perceive the narrative space that is built around the camera's position. Since it concerns our own bodily and physiological engagement here, it is not only psychological, it concerns gender as well. Gendering the spectator was obviously not of concern for Matz and his contemporaries, but already in the 70s, feminist film theorists started to tackle the issue of the female spectator. One of the first theorists to address the question, what happens to us female spectators, was Laura Mulvey in Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. The answers Mulvey came up with to answer the question what happens to the female spectator was, to put it mildly, dissatisfactory. So many scholars, feminist theorists, started to tackle the same question and came up with, well, better answers to the original question. Since gender and feminist film theory is a whole new chapter in the book as well, I'm going to talk about it later, not in this video. Next time, I'm moving on to a quite complex approach, the fifth element, the fifth approach in psychoanalytic film theory. This is going to be the analog model. See you then, stay safe and healthy.